You might have a delegation online. It's there.
We have two delegations in the room. Is there anybody online who would be a delegation for any of the business items today? Not hearing.
Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you, Robert.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm here. If possible, I have a statement a short statement I'd like to read.
Okay, so when you say short statement, are you an applicant for one of the business items on the agenda?
Yeah, I'm an applicant.
Which item is that? 7.5? We did that.
Yeah, the application with Jeremy DeWitt for 8965 Highway 6, Selmo.
Zach, which item is that?
I have to pull up the agenda, but it's the ALC referral, A2401G.
Yeah, non-adhering 7.5. Okay, so when we get to that item, we will invite you to speak to the item. If you want to stay on mute until we get there, that would be great.
Thank you.
Okay. So I want to acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples within whose traditional lands we're meeting today. And then move to item 4, adoption of the agenda. I'm not aware of any items to pull or any new items. So do we have a mover and seconder for adoption of the agenda? Anagraph, Watson. Discussion not needed. All in favor? None opposed. Thank you. That's carried. We also received minutes. We have the minutes from April 17th Rural Affairs Committee. Of course, they went to board already. We saw them last month. So delegations, we have 3 delegations. So we have 7.4, 7.5, and then the other one is the application for the school project. And you have that one, Christine, or not? Oh, okay, so that's where I wanted to. So there is a, which, sorry, it is?
7.6 is the other delegation.
Yeah, if everybody online, Andy, if you could mute, we're getting feedback from somewhere there. I can see screens coming off now. So for 7.6, we also have a delegation. So as we get to each item, I will ask if anybody wants to either answer questions or provide any input. Okay, so under 7, we have 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3 have been referred numerous times. All 3 of them now have the same recommendation from staff. So I would prefer to deal with these as a block. You can go to board as a block. But Chris, if you can give us the update where we are on this, we're finally in the clear with applications or building permits.
Through the chair, yes. So we've received 3 applications for the replacement permits for these 3 items on the agenda. Maybe I'll just give an overview of kind of where we're at. We'll go ahead. So the first one is for the shop. That shop had passed framing with some minor things outstanding. We're required to close that file. We received that replacement permit. I've reviewed, I deemed that we've got enough information in the existing file moving forward with issuance. We have not received payment yet. I will note that. The next permit, which is the deck, again, similar to the first one, where we passed framing with some deficiencies remaining, required to final that. And then we've got the final one, which is that manufactured home, where the owners have the option again to get some engineering to make up for that deficient snow load, which was really the thing holding that up, or to demolish the structure, which I understand is an option for them too, that they are looking into. That structure is not high value as far as I know. That's what they communicated to me.
So in all 3, you're satisfied that they're moving towards compliance?
I am.
So thanks very much for that. Any questions for staff on these, Director Vandenberg?
And the question is, Chris, just your comment on haven't received any payment. Does that then technically mean that it's not actual, it's an official application? until payment is received.
Can we focus on the mic is over
Yeah.
here? And
Until payment is
Thank you.
received, does that mean that the application is good standing or not? I'm just wondering if they don't pay, will this, and if we give the recommendation that you're asking for, it's like going to create a problem.
That is a risk, that somebody is not paying for a permit that's been issued. So yeah, that is certainly a risk, given the value of these replacement permits. I don't see that as being, a high risk, they're not high value, replacement permits that we're talking about here.
Right. Thank you. And if supplemental, if I may?
Go ahead.
Based on the history here, this just sounds like a little bit of a volleyball game going back and forth. I don't know that I'm prepared to accept that risk. If these people are serious about it, the payment should have been in. Therefore, I don't know that I would want to suspend or recommend that, however it is written, no further action being taken at this time is my comment.
Gonna go to CEO in a second. I just want to clarify though, is it only one of the three that they have not paid for the permit, or
No, it's the three. The three were submitted at the same time simultaneously.
outstanding payment on all three of them? Let's go to CEO.
So through the chair, normal practice is that if you did move no further action, full stop, 6 months would be the amount of time you have to wait before bringing it back to the table. By stating no further action at this time, we're closing it for the time being. But if staff sees that things are moving, we could bring this back in June for an NOT application. So if we have that sort of direction to staff, that if we don't see movement, we could bring it back in June, and we can definitely do that. But this isn't something where I think Chris is well aware of the risks, but rather than having it keep being referred down the road, moving no further action at this time, lets the applicant know that the committee's accepted that you moved this far, so they're willing, or you're willing in good faith to say, yeah, let's try to get this wrapped up. But at the same time, doesn't prevent you from bringing it back in June to address the concerns that we just outlined.
Thank you.
So there's two things here. Take it off our agenda. These three items appear over and over and over again. Now, as committee members or board members, we're here to listen to everything and whenever we have to. The other side that concerns me more is the amount of staff time this consumes. When I hear about a builder who's got a brand new building application, he knows what they want to do, or she knows what she wants to do. They have a contractor lined up and they're waiting for a permit. So this is a policy piece I brought up a little bit before. We just can't keep doing this. So what we do here, we won't be looking at it, but staff still will be. Unless we do the notice on title, and staff will stop looking, period. So, it's up to the committee's decision what they want to do. I guess as CEO just said, staff are more confident now than you were 1 month ago, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, that there might be compliance. So any further questions for staff, or somebody want to make a recommendation? And if you want, you can move them as a block, or you can move them individually.
So
Sorry?
Chair, I'd like to move. Oh, Chair,
Yes, Director David, go ahead.
yeah, given what the CEO has said, I'd like to move no further action on all three of these because I don't want to see these coming back again. If they come back again, it's a notice on title. So we know that's the only time we will see it again.
So as a block,
Thank you.
no further action at this time. Do we have a second? Second, Director Hanegraaff, discussion on that block of recommendations? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? So those are carried to go to board tomorrow. Thanks very much. Thanks, Chris. That's 7172.
Oh, so Chair, just I'd like to make a comment if possible.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank staff for their patience and thank the Rural Affairs Committee for its patience. This thing was getting way out of hand, and I echo Kelly's comments about and the chair's comments about we can't keep doing things this way. It's just too cumbersome. So we have to look at a better way. I don't know what it is, but I just want to thank staff, and I want to thank the members of RAC for their patience on these three files. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, noted. We'll go to item 7.4. This is a Area A application. Stephanie's here to give us a bit of an overview. It is development variance application for Ken Crow. The applicant is here and he can answer questions. If you wanted to sit up at the table, we'll start off with Stephanie to give an overview. Then if you had any input you wanted to add as applicant, and then answer questions. Stephanie, yeah, so go ahead with Cole's notes on this, please.
Great, thank you, Chair Jackman. So this is a development variance permit application which seeks to allow an alternative private wastewater disposal system than that required in our RDCK subdivision bylaw. So specifically, this variance request seeks to vary section 9.01 A of our subdivision bylaw. And basically that requirement is where no community wastewater system exists or is proposed, confirmation of assessment for capabilities on the basis of a type 1 system, that septic tank and disposal field, treatment for each proposed lot is required. The applicant in this case is proposing a type 2 treatment system for proposed residential lot A and B. And consideration or approval of this DVP would then facilitate a rural subdivision that would otherwise not be possible given the proposed wastewater system. So that's the Cole's notes, and as the committee knows, I'm here to help answer any questions should they arise.
Okay, but just thinking, maybe we'll let the applicant add any comments, and then we'll go to questions on either. So Ken, Mr. Crow, did you want to add or comment on anything in the report? There were some points in the report about the how detailed the engineering report was, or the level of information that could support this application with better detail.
I guess what I'm here for today is to kind of understand or figure this out, because it's mind-boggling to me that all along the lake there's type 2 systems. Mr. Jackman's very aware of all this. Right now I have tried to separate 27 acres into 2 3.5 acre parcels and 1 20-acre parcel. The 20-acre parcel can have a type 1 system on it. The 2 existing houses that are on the 7 acres, which I would like to put the imaginary line in between them, that's 7 acres, so I'd like to make 3. They both have an existing type 2 system right now. That I've owned this place for 11 years, and in your report, they have concerns that I might not be able to take care of a type 2 system. I've had 2 of them personally for 11 years now. I've had no problems. I maintain them. It's just mind-boggling to say I can't have another type 2 system when I have 2 of them, and this is what's holding it up. If I went home today and my system failed, and I'm not able to put in a type 1 because I'm living on a rock, and you won't allow me to put a type 2 in, according to this, I'm confused on what I would do at the end of the day to where my sewage would go. So I know it's a wording thing in your bylaw, but I think this wording is, and I think it's in your report actually, that it says where a type 1 cannot be used, a type 2 or 3 is doable. And I've done a lot of research, and I haven't found anything that says a type 1 is better than a type 2. I've actually found that the type 2 system is better than a type 1 system. So I think, and I don't mean to be rude in any way, but I think your bylaw is outdated, and there could be a couple of wording changes perhaps, but again, I'm at the mercy of you guys. But if I see on your report that it's kind of you guys are trying to deny this, I guess at the end of the day, if we can't figure something out today. If I was to be able to give it more time to figure this out. I got this report, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, maybe, a couple weeks ago. And, so all of a sudden, you know, I had no way of answering some of the questions, and some of the stuff in there I don't think is even relevant. It says that I put a set of stairs in. Well, I did, because I have to have access to get down to the water, to my water system, but I don't see how that's relevant to a septic system. It said there was a slight disturbance on the south end. I've never done, I moved a picnic table down there in the 11 years, so I have no idea what these guys are talking about. But anyway, I'm getting a little bit off here, but I'm trying to, for the life of me, understand how everybody else can have a type 2 system. They don't have a program. Nobody that I'm aware of has a program. They want me to have a program. If they want a maintenance program, I'll give you a maintenance program. But my soil where I'm at is the reason I have 2 type 2 systems, because I can't put a type 1 system in. And I don't even need these systems. These are a secondary system in case mine fails. It's not like I'm trying to put a new one. I think that's kind of my spiel.
Okay, thank you very much. So I don't see any questions in chat. What we'll do now, there's, well, now I have 3 directors on a speakers list. So I have Directors Graham, Cunningham, and Vandenberg. So I guess primarily questions for the applicant, but I think you might have a question for staff as well. We might as well just do it as efficiently as we can. Anyway, Director Graham, go ahead.
Thank you through the chair. I'm the new director here, and I don't know the difference between a type 1 and type 2 system. I'll get a little quick.
Do you want me to give the
I was actually Googling type 2 systems, but I still don't really.
Sure, thank you. Through the chair, under the provincial sewerage system regulation, septic systems are divided into 3 types. There's type 1, 2, and 3. Type 1 is permitted by septic tank and drainage field, and that may be gravity fed or pumped into the drainage field. Type 2 and type 3 systems introduce further treatment, and that's in order to produce a higher quality effluent that can be discharged into a smaller size drainage field. And type 2 and type 3 systems are often used when there are site or soil constraints that really prevent a type 1 system from being used. These systems often use a package treatment plant, and they have mechanical or media components that require more frequent maintenance than a type 1 system.
Okay, for the director, go ahead.
Supplemental question would be the maintenance then on all of these systems, is that required by a licensed septic contractor, or do homeowners do their own maintenance?
Through the chair, type 2 and type 3 systems should have some type of recommended maintenance plan. Some local governments would also have a maintenance bylaw for consideration of these types of systems as well. Ours does not. Thank you.
Yes, basically it's the plan to acknowledge that if there's a filter or a pump or a timer and stuff, that you know what to check and when to check it. And whether or not you use someone else or not, it's the same as can you change a tap washer in your kitchen taps or if you hire a plumber. So Director Cunningham, Vandenberg, and then Weatherhead. Director Cunningham.
Yes, thank you. It seems to me a nice success stuff. And when we talked about type 2 systems and type 3 systems in the past, sometimes when we permitted it, we also included something on title that said that it had to be checked by a professional every so often. So that in order to ensure that it met the standard. Because of course, if, with all due regard, if we kick the bucket or got hit by a bus out here, who's going to be able to take, next person who will take care of the system? And that's why we in the past, I mean, very well back, because we haven't done it with this in a while, have put something on title that said, okay, you have to have your septic system checked by so and so, every so often.
Not wanting to jump too much, but the Modi comments, Ministry of Transportation did refer to covenant as a potential step. And then maybe Director Cunningham, did you want the applicant to respond to whether or not considered that? Or as he said, I think you need
My
more.
accuracy, Chair, was really, I understand where the applicant's coming from. And the fact that you're really able to maintain the system, because it's not like it's really a big bill, but there are people who don't have those capabilities. That's why there is, we in the past, we have had, put some kind of covenant on title. Is that, do you recall any others lately? Don't recall having seen one in, say, the last 10 years.
Through the chair, I'm not familiar at the regional district in the last 10 years if we've been requiring covenants. As the chair mentioned, the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure alluded to the potential for requiring a covenant. At this stage, the septic reports, which are included as attachments in the package, did not include recommendations for maintenance, and that's part of the concern that staff had with the existing reports.
Supplemental?
Yeah, supplemental, perhaps, as was mentioned, our thing is on the date, perhaps we should do something like some municipalities or regional districts are doing that would include in necessity, if you have a type 2 or 3 system, then there's something necessary that with regards to that kind of thing.
Bylaw wording.
Yes,
Update.
yes.
If you wanted an example, right across from Holbrook Falls, and I cannot think it was a 5-parcel subdivision, there may be a covenant on that one. I can't think of any other site where it was at, and it's high, a very rocky site.
But that's usually what's done.
Yeah, so we'll go through then, continuing on, Director Vandenberg, Weatherhead, and then Watson. Either, I guess, question for the applicant, Director Vandenberg, or staff clarification.
I think it's more along the lines of clarification. So the private sewage designer, West Kootenai Septic Systems, did the percolation test to determine what the soils can handle. They determined that a type 2 with a sand mound with microdosing is appropriate for this area. That's a higher level of treatment than a type 1. It's going to be a little bit more costly. And this is a professional that does the design work as per the Ministry of BC's sewer system standard of practice. Along with that standard of practice is an intensive maintenance and a requirement program, both from the homeowner and if it's a type 3 system or it's a packaged plant, you have to contract that out. You can't do that yourself. This is a sand mound, so it's something that the owner would probably be able to do. And it's a requirement. This is a step up for treatment compared to the type 1. I don't see where we should be holding this up. Interior Health has a say in this, but certainly the contractor, the certified contractor has done his diligence to design a system and is recommending a type 2 for this property. I think that needs to be clearly understood, because I happen to design and install septic systems in Alberta, so I know a little bit about this. Although BC is a little bit different, same principles apply.
Okay, thank you. So we're going into a little bit that would be the conversation once we have a recommendation on the floor, sort of in question or clarification by either the applicant or staff, but we'll continue with the speakers list. Director Weatherhead, then Watson. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just have a couple of questions. First of all, for clarity, can you explain the relation between the community not showing a community water line easement to the septic? What is the relation between water and sewage?
So through the chair, the relevant storage regulations by the province, there are standards where septic treatment has to be located a certain distance from water courses. And so staff outlined in the report that there is a water course which isn't shown on the site plan attached to the septic report. It's also our understanding from reviewing the title that there is a water line easement to an adjacent property. So we wanted to ensure where that location was on the site plan. And that's not shown as well. Despite having these conversations with the professional engineer and the applicant. So that's a concern to staff.
Further, go ahead.
So I'll just supplemental on that then.
Yes.
So does this just require more working with the a proponent here to ensure that those things are in place?
Through the chair, that's one of the options in the staff report. I believe it's the second option is to refer this application to allow for a revised plan to be submitted.
Okay. All right, so then my second question through the chair, is this a gravity fed system? It is being proposed with the type 2.
No, there,
No, oh, it's not. Okay.
okay, thank you. So speakers list is growing a bit and there may be hopefully questions for the applicant as well. But Watson and then Newell, please go ahead.
Thank you. I understand where the applicant's coming from. And it was kind of asked by Director Weatherhead, but I'm gonna ask again, because I think quite not your fault, Stephanie, at all. It's just following this. My understanding through the chair to staff is that we don't approve septic systems, Interior Health does. And so the ability to actually approve this DVP is required to meet the regulations of disposal. So I don't know where we have discretion on that because it's still Interior Health that's the ultimate approving authority on sewer and septic. Is that correct?
Through the chair, the Regional Health Authority monitors the filings of plans, the septic reports submitted. So there's that layer of provincial agency approval. As we all know, the regional district has our separate subdivision and servicing bylaw requirements. And so that's why this variance application is coming to the regional districts committee right now in regional board for consideration. And then ultimately, as we all know, Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure is our rural subdivision approving officer. So there's definitely a few different layers of agency approvals and government approvals for this particular type of application.
Supplemental.
Yeah, I was just going to interject. I think this is more heavily professional reliance.
Right.
But it's missing like the engineering or the legal or the other associations, land surveyors, provincial self-enforcing compliance and enforcement agencies. I think this is a self-reliance model that I couldn't tell you who would respond to a complaint or concern directly if someone was in non-compliance. If they're an engineer, I could tell you, but if they're a practitioner otherwise, that may be a gap in the system because I don't know whether the Interior Health would have who actually licenses these professionals. Ministry of Health. Anyway, sorry, supplemental.
No, thank you. For me, what's highlighting is that there's the discretion ability to make a decision at this table, and then there's all the professionals behind it that we must follow their regulations. So that's the gray line I'm trying to decipher. The last note in the planning comments, which is planning discussion, that section, it says that Interior Health does not support subdivision or creating new lots based on type 2 sewage disposal systems. So I'm trying to sort through this. And I think that the liability on if we approve this as a type 1 to me says that we have a greater liability because we're going against what's being recommended, not only from a regulatory perspective, but from the professional perspective. So trying to wade in, and that might be a question for Stuart regarding liability and how far we take our discretion when we're going against the recommendations of the professionals. So either one.
Through the chair, it's certainly a risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sorry, can I just ask Stephanie that last comment, Interior Health does not support subdivision on type 2 disposal systems. That's confusing me because that's what we're suggesting is required here.
Through the chair, perhaps another way to look at it, Interior Health comments through our standard referral process also included that they support the regional district subdivision bylaw, which has that requirement for a type 1 system.
Yet they're not the authority,
Oh.
even though they're called Interior Health Authority. We are using this as a test case, I guess, the patience of the applicant, obviously, because this isn't a new thing. I do have Director Newell and Vandenberg for the second time, unless there's some other speaker for the first time. Director Newell, I see Davidoff, Newell, Davidoff, Vandenberg. Please go ahead, Director Newell.
Hopefully this question is not redundant. If we were to approve a variance to a type 2 system, is that the end of the story in regard to IHA and septic systems? Or could IHA say, no, we won't allow it? through to staff, please.
Through the chair, I think this is great discussion in a sense, when we have different approval authorities, and this is all having to do with a rural subdivision application, of which we all know the regional district isn't the approving officer. In my role here as a RDCK planner, I can really only comment to our bylaws and what our authorities are. So I wouldn't be able to speak on behalf of our regional health authority, nor the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. So in front of the committee here today is a request to vary our subdivision bylaw, and that's really all I'm able to speak to in terms of the process. I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of our provincial approving officer.
Supplemental.
Go ahead.
That's interesting. We have in Area F approved type 2 systems when there have been lot constraints on the waterfront of Kootenay Lake. So yeah, it's and the house is built and the system is existing. So IHA somehow allowed that to happen. So anyway, I'm enjoying the conversation. It's quite interesting. Thank you.
Noted. Director Davidoff, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm confused. I always understood for all the years that I've sat on the board that IH approved septic systems, full stop. So now we're seeing a variance application where we are being asked to approve a variance that IHA has stated full stop, they do not approve. And I am really concerned about what we're trying to do here. And also, I have a question to the CAO, you know, about this, the liability part, because the CAO sits on the board of MIABC. So if something goes wrong, I mean, we're going to get sued if we approve this. Is that correct, through the chair to the CAO?
Through the chair, I can't really speculate on that.
Okay, but we have so supplemental then. Is there potential to the CAO? Is there potential liability exposure here if we pass or recommend to the board that this variance be approved? Is there potential exposure to the RDCK because it is contrary to IHA policy? If something goes wrong.
Through the chair, maybe it's a question back to Stephanie. I don't think IHA is saying that this is their policy. IHA said they support the regional district's bylaw requiring the type 1 system. So I think that's different from saying that it's IHA's policy.
Okay, point of clarification then. I thought I heard staff say that IHA does not approve type 2 use of type 2 systems in these types of subdivision applications. So I just wanted that.
We'll put it back to Stephanie. I think the word might be preferred, but Stephanie?
Through the chair, the scheme of sewage system regulations is that the construction and operation standards are established by our Ministry of Health, and compliance with those standards is monitored by our regional health authorities by means of filings of plans and specifications for on-site systems before and after installation. And our regional health authorities rely on those qualified professionals when those reports are filed.
So it's not an approval by health authority, it's a professional reliance model. It is different from many of the models that some of us live and work in. You included, Director Davidoff, as a lawyer, myself as an engineer. It's a different model. We're in the middle of it with one line in a bylaw where we have no authority one way or the other. That's, I'm going to be for allowing speakers for the second time. That's my comment. We're in the middle of something where we have no authority, and the actual approval mechanism, I don't think is crystal clear to any of us. So that was me for the first time. I have speakers for the second time.
Chair, I'd just
Oh,
like to,
no, wait, Director Davidoff,
Oh, yeah,
I'm moving
second
on to
time,
another
second time.
speaker.
yeah, second
Director
time.
Davidoff, I'm moving on. I will put you back on the list. I would ask that the committee, we're holding the applicant at the table. We're well beyond the conversation of questions to the applicant. So for the second time, if you don't have a question for the applicant, say you'll wait. We'll excuse the applicant if there's no more clarifications. Then I'll be looking for a recommendation, whether it's referral, approval, or not approved. So, Director Vandenberg, do you have a question for the applicant?
No.
Okay, we'll wait. Director Cunningham, you have a question for the applicant?
Yes, my question to
Okay,
you.
wait, and then Director Davidoff, will yours be a question for the applicant?
No,
Okay, so we'll go Director Cunningham, then we'll excuse the applicant. Please go ahead.
My question to the applicant is, would you be amenable to approval, providing there was something or some on title that said regarding professional
Oh, absolutely, because I understand your second part of this is if I sell it tomorrow and the guy comes from, we'll just say the city and has no idea what a septic field is, there needs to be some kind of a guideline or rules on every 2 years you have a professional come out and this is something that you guys could add on in the future, that any new septic fields need to be maintained every second, third year by a professional. I don't.
When we looked at the issue of providing sewage services to other areas in the past, we've done studies. I seem to recall the big thing, of course, is those who needed individual type services rather than being on a sewer system. And if it was difficult servicing, because a lot of the regional district is difficult servicing, that we provide something whereby it's an automatic check by professional.
Right.
And that notice is put on title so everybody knows you have to do it. You can't just move into the property and not know. And not quite, that's why the service.
Okay, and that's a very relevant question. So thanks very much. If you wouldn't mind stepping back to the gallery, we'll continue with the speakers list and hopefully we'll have a recommendation, one or the other, come out on this one. So I will go back to Director Vandenberg. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Through the chair. I guess my first comment is the bylaw 2159 does appear to be somewhat outdated in 9.01 as it only reflects type 1, when the reality is that our technology is talking about type 2 and type 3 that are available. So therefore, I would grant the variance. I do have faith in the standard of practice and the person that's designing this system knows what they're doing and is recommending, based on what the soils can handle, a type 2 system, which is a higher level of treatment. And so I would respect that in terms of the design. Liability around technology is going to change. No matter what we decide today, the technology will change and we could be at risk tomorrow. So that shouldn't be holding us back. That's just the way it is. But I do have Stephanie did bring up a point of concern that setbacks is an important part of the design. And according to the report that the certified designer has, he's saying that the closest water feature is 45 meters, that is from Kootenay Lake. But Stephanie, you had mentioned that other water sources that are traveling through the property that were not reflected on the site plan. That kind of concerns me because those setbacks, there's a reason for setbacks when you design these type of systems. And if they're not, if they are indeed there and not reflected on the site plan, to verify that your setback for your mound, which is probably about 3 meters only, or 10 meters, depending on what the situation is, that needs to be a part of this. That's missing. I'm thinking, based on your comment and what I'm seeing on the subdivision or on the drawings submitted by the certified person. So that would be my concern on this, is if there's other features, water features on the property that are not reflected on the site plan, you cannot verify that the setbacks are there.
Just basically a comment on the question. Okay, thank you. I'll move to Director Davidoff.
yeah, Chair, I would support a referral motion, but I'd also.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I would support a referral motion. I'm not making the motion. I would support a referral motion to address the technical issues that have been raised. I appreciate what Kelly just raised, but I'd also like to have Director Vanderburg, sorry, but I'd also like to see, because I don't want to leave our staff kind of, out on a limb here. I would like to see a legal opinion on what we should be doing in a situation like this, because right now it's like a 50-50. It's like it's like a flip of the coin. Like we're not sure about what we're doing. So the referral, if there was a referral, we could address the technical issues that have been raised, and also we could get an opinion on which way to proceed in terms of our potential liability. And there are our lawyers have been, I'm sure, have seen this before and could give us some advice that would give everyone comfort. I mean, they may come back and say, you've got to register some covenants on the property, or you've got to do other things, to protect yourself and future owners and everything else. So that's my comment.
So comments noted. You're the last speaker on the list right now. Are you making? Oh, sorry. No, absolutely. Weatherhead.
Thank you. Through the
We'll go to the next speaker then. And Newell. Okay, go ahead.
He brings up a good point, but my question to that would be, would the notice on title be enough to, in lieu of legal advice?
Well, okay. I'm going to jump in here a little bit, because this is one, it's not, we've expanded this well beyond this application. We make a decision on this application based on staff recommendation and or what we've heard here. Before jumping to a legal opinion, I think it's much more prudent to review our language, our restrictions in a bylaw, what standard practice in other similarly rural areas, say Cherry Creek or something. I drive through there all the time, similar to us, the Monashee say, where they have different conditions. That to me would be the more clear direction to staff to say, give us a little background on this. CEO has got a comment on this in a second. Before we jump to a legal opinion, because you need something to frame the legal opinion around, or we're going to spend $20,000 and get nothing back. We have to say, here's what we think is, here's our current practice, here's what we think is the better practice, and what do they think? So I think the legal opinion is down the road, if at all. The speakers list is expanding now. CEO, you had thoughts about jumping to a legal opinion. There's no referral, there's no recommendation, but let's just entertain that thought momentarily. CEO, so where would you go with that?
Through the chair, there's discussion around taking a look at our bylaw, and I think that's where the legal discussion should come in reviewing the requirements that this committee and then the board would have for approving either a type 2 or a type 3, because the issue is, and the reason that Interior prefers type is it takes the responsibility away from the property owner, who in 90% of the cases are very educated and can maintain those systems. But in the 10% they don't, or as the applicant said, property sells and someone comes in who might not be educated around these systems, lets it lapse, and then there's an impact to the environment. That's why the type 1 is preferred, because it takes that what if out of the scenario. But if you have again, we've talked about professional reliance. If you build that into the bylaw, just like we do in our building bylaw in terms of what we require with respect to qualified professionals, then the committee can be satisfied. You present this information, and that's what we're approving the type 2 based on. But that larger conversation needs to happen with regard to the bylaw. This file specifically could start that process depending on how the committee feels in terms of the risk that it's taken on with respect to how the system's going to be maintained. But nonetheless, it sounds like the bigger conversation around the bylaw change needs to be had. And I think that's where we bring in the legal discussion around, are we asking enough of the applicants to make sure that the risk is appropriately moved off of the committee and the RDCA.
So thanks very much for that. No recommendations so far. We do have to do something with this application. I will return to you, Director Weatherhead, then I will go to Director Popoff for the first time, then back to Director Newell for the second time. And always looking for a recommendation if somebody thinks they're ready. Director Weatherhead, supplemental?
Well, I think that I would, if I would support a referral, is with certain restrictions in place.
Are you moving referral or just comment?
Well, let's try that. I would like to move a referral, and, pending the receipt of the revised septic, reports,
So we move referral, but the direction of staff is gonna be to obtain the more detailed.
more
engineering.
detail and
So,
some assurance, and this is where my question was around those on title, so maybe I'm not really ready to make that referral myself, maybe there's more discussion that needs to happen.
okay, Director Popoff has not spoken for the first time, so if you wanna wait,
Okay.
that's fine. Director Popoff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would support referral on this one because we're not sure about our bylaw, but subject to the bylaw being reviewed by our staff and brought up to date. It's a 2011 bylaw.
This application can be held up for a year and a half based on a bylaw amendment, though, so I just want to be clear. If you refer, and there's no other first-time speakers, it will be simply refer back to staff to obtain the clarification they feel they need for confidence for this application. I would hope that would be what you mean. Anyway, sorry, continue, sir.
Okay, so you basically explained, it might take a couple of years to review the bylaw.
Separate
And we'd be
process.
deferring this for a couple of years, so that I will not move any referral or whatever, but if somebody does move referral, I will support that.
Okay, well, you can move referral for the additional information that staff has requested. I hope I'm not complicating this too much. I will go to Director Hanegraaff for the first time, Newell for the second time, is still on the list. Please go ahead.
I'll move referral with direction to staff to get clarification.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Second on referral. On the propriety of referral, and I think we kind of covered it. This is for one case, one site, one clarification. Any question about propriety of referral? Seeing no questions, all in favor? Any opposed? Oh, sorry, referral to proposed committee. We won't record opposed. We are referred to then July RAC.
Yeah, and through the chair, if I could just,
Or sorry, June RAC. We're still in May, June RAC.
and chair, if I could just clarify with Stephanie that she's got proper direction in terms of what she needs from
To
the
adequate
applicant.
directions.
Yeah.
So this will come back in 1 month just on this application. So that will go to board tomorrow for final approval. Now, I still had a speaker of Director Newell. Do you want to make another comment or on this bylaw issue as a whole? I'd rather just have a very general direction to staff to sort this out. I'd start with who is actually approving a system. Is it oversight by Interior Health, record keeping, or are they actually approving anything? Or does this fall on Ministry of Health? Because Ministry of Transportation clearly states in their comments that Ministry has no concerns with the proposed variance to allow for a type 2 system for subdivision. However, should be approved, may require registration of a septic covenant. So that is the direction I would like to see staff take to clarify whether or not we should be interjecting or intervening on these issues during subdivision application. I do want to go to Director Newell. Did you have any other comment, Director Newell?
Only a very brief comment. As with later this week, we will be looking at densification. And one of the hugest reasons that we can't do even more densification is septic. So that's why I found this conversation so curious. I thank the applicant for putting up with our questions of a much broader scope than just his particular case. And I thank him for bringing it forward and his insights. And we'll have more discussions about this later this week. That's all I wanted to say, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks. And that is Bill 44. We are mandated to consider how to densify our residential areas. I'm going to go to Chair Watson on procedure, then Director Cunningham, and we'll need to move on. Go ahead.
Two things, just making sure Director Newell knows it's later today, not this week. Stay tuned, Newell, we're talking about it today. And for you, you noted that this was going to be a board tomorrow. It's not, because we're referring it to June.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Just making sure the applicant.
Why did I say that? Yeah, there's.
Thank you.
Nobody else sees again until it comes back to the rural committee. In a month, you would be invited to attend as applicant again if you so desired, or you can attend by web. Director Cunningham, a wrap-up thought, then we'll move to the next.
Wrap up, I'd like to point out that even type one systems have to be installed by qualified professionals
Yes,
and registered with the Ministry of Health.
yes.
Because I had one done recently and indeed, and that is all, even in type one. So it's expected that a type two would certainly require at least a similar kind of thing installed by professional. And of course, registered with the Ministry of Health. And also, like I keep mentioning the thing about the covenant, something that assures, because it's an operational thing, you want to make sure that it's going to operate and going to need some kind of inspection or something that the homeowner knows needs to be done on a regular basis in order to maintain the system.
Yeah, thanks for that, because it would be the standard wording where we could be most helpful in the process of what a covenant would be, because that's the
Exactly.
land side.
That's
What we deal with. So, very good. We can move on to 7.5. Non-adhering residential CEO.
Sorry, through the chair, just before the committee starts the discussion on this matter, the motion in the agenda is incorrect. It takes the recommendation and the applicant's name from a previous report, unfortunately. So it's, instead of no comment and the name Ben Conroy, it's not support and the name Jeremy DeWitt in your agenda.
On 7.5?
On 7.5. So 7.5 currently says provide no comment proposed by Ben Conroy. That is incorrect. It's not support. And the applicant's name or the proposal is from Jeremy DeWitt.
Okay, so this is
Apologies for that.
interesting because my scribble sheet says that on the previous one, to me, it should have been approve, not approve, or refer. And we didn't have all three of those. We had 2 or 3. On this one, it says options, no comment or approved, whereas the board report said not approved. So again, to me, every report is always an option, the committee, approve, not approve, or whatever it has to be, redirect, whatever you want to call that. So thanks for that. That's pretty substantive. Now, we do have the applicant online. Zach is online as well. So maybe just to explain process, because we don't want to get people speaking over one another, as happens even in the room. You can ask Zach for a few minutes, Cole's notes on where we're at, especially why I can see where the not support comes from. It's in the report. And then we will ask the applicant. So now, who is online as the applicant? Is it Jeremy DeWitt?
No, it's Bob Measures.
Sorry?
Bob Measures.
Bob Measures. And you have that, Christine?
Yeah, I believe Jeremy is online as well.
Yeah, I see it, Jeremy, but Bob Measures will be speaking. So I'll ask our planner to give the Coles notes where we're at. And then Mr. Measures, if you want to,
The applicant or just the public that wants to comment?
No,
Mr. Measures is a representative for the applicant.
no, vice versa. The agent is Jeremy DeWitt, Robert Measures is the property owner.
Okay, so who's going to want to speak? Let's just clarify that. Who's going to speak to this in a few minutes?
Can you hear me? I would like to speak, Robert Measures.
Okay, so I'm going to go to staff, then I'm going to ask you, you could have up to 10 minutes if you wanted, and then answer questions for 5. And then we will have our committee conversation. So we'll start with Zach. Please give us a Coles notes, brief summary of where we're at. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Jackman. Coles notes on this application. The ALC regulations currently limit a secondary res to 90 square meters. The applicant is proposing to construct 150 square meters. And the proposal is to renovate an existing agricultural building, or at least a portion of that existing agricultural building in order to convert it to a dwelling. So there's no new building footprints proposed. It's a proposal to essentially use an existing building footprint that's currently used, excuse me, as storage in a horse barn, and convert a portion of that building to a secondary residence.
Okay. Thank you. So, Mr. Measures, the floor is yours as a delegation. Tell us what you would like to add to the report or other background information you feel we may not be aware of. And then if you would be willing to answer questions from the committee, that would be great. And then after we get past that, we will ask you to remain muted and we'll have our conversation around recommendations or options. So the floor is yours. Go ahead, please, Paul.
Okay, thank you very much. Everybody can hear me fine, I hope?
Yes.
Yes, okay, sorry about that. I always have problems on these Zoom calls. Okay, so hello, everyone. My name is Rob Measures. I'm the owner of the application. I want to make a final statement first to apologize again about the misleading idea that we have sick horses currently that we need to look after as part of this application. And I'd like to champion my project and give a final explanation of why I think I should be given permission to build a bigger second residence on my property than is currently allowed by the ALC. First, I think the amount of farming that I'm doing on my land now as a measure to decide whether I should be allowed a bigger residence misses what I see as the point of my application. As Zachary knows from his visit with me at the property that I am proud of my little farm and my plans for it in the future, but I don't claim to need a bigger residence for farm help to live in. The reason I think the portion of the barn deserves to become a bigger residence is because I feel the whole building should be restored as closely as it can to how it was originally built. And it makes sense that the log portion that was for cattle become a residence and the horse portion remains for horses, while the breezeway in the middle stays as access for both. What I really want to do is bring what I know once was one of Samo's most beautiful old barns and make it beautiful and shine again. I can never put animals in the log portion of it again, and I know it can be more than just a storage building that it currently is. And finally, I want to point out that if I'm allowed to go ahead with this application, there will be a big win for me and for future agricultural use because I won't be building my second residence on a new footprint, taking up more land on the property. Before I finish, I also just want to invite anyone that has any advice for me to feel free to give it when it comes to the question of whether I should put forward a new application outlining what I've just said, and that will receive better consensus among everyone before it has the chance to be passed on to the ALC. Thank you. That's it.
Hey, thank you. So open to questions to the applicant, or even would we want to comment, because you had just asked a question, I guess, of staff. Zach, would there be benefit to have the application reworded from scratch if there's corrections or updates that are needed?
Through the chair, the application itself is not changing. I think what Rob was just mentioning is that if he should include more of an explanation or maybe a rationale, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it seems like he's just saying if he should be explaining it in a different way or providing more of a rationale, he'd like to be able to include for consideration. But in terms of the other changes that Stuart pointed out, those were just technical errors with how the recommendation was incorporated in this report. So now that Stuart clarified what that recommendation is, I don't know if there's any need to refer this to a
You're cutting in and out a little bit, Zach, but you're looking as though you want to stand with your report, certainly, it sounds like. I guess what I want clarification on, this is two-step then. The landowner could certainly, if they wanted, revise their application to the ALC at this point. And I guess that's my question. Maybe back to Mr. Measures. Would you prefer to revise, because the bigger part of this is not an application to us, it's a flow through. Do you want to revise your wording in your application to the Agricultural Land Commission before we act on this? Or were you looking for some other change in wording from our staff report? Because it sounds like that stands on its own.
Well, yeah, I guess I have a real problem with, there was some miscommunication between me and Jeremy, and I have a real problem with the way it's written because it just sounds like I'm asking for help with sick horses. It just sounds like a big lie. And if that's going to go to the ALC as well, and they're going to look at that and think the same thing, I think it's better to go with different wording on this application, even if it's not going to change what Zachary thinks about it as far as, you know, his whether he's going to refer it or not. So I guess I'm still looking for advice whether I guess I would like to just change the wording of the application, because I don't want to spend another 6 months when I could have had a better chance and communicated more clearly and then waited the 6 months. The hypothetical 6 months it might take the ALC to make a decision on the application. So I'm thinking maybe it is worth just changing the wording, even if it won't change ultimately the consensus around the room right now.
Okay, so, yeah, because what I read, there's a proposal that talks about commonly contains 2 or more horses with special needs. That's an application to the land commission. We don't change that. That's not our business whatsoever. So what I think I would like to do is I do have a speakers list. If this ends up being referred, so that between you and planning staff or whatever other, because ALC has their own planning people as well that you can communicate with, I understand. If you want to revise your application, then probably our best position is going to be to refer. But because we have an opportunity to learn more right now, if this does come back, I'd like to run through the speakers and let them ask you questions if they can. So I have Cunningham, Vandenberg, and Watson.
Okay, thank you. Yes,
what-
Chair, I would support referral in order to change the wording as was mentioned. But also, I have a statement. This was approved by the APHC. They looked at it and said, yes, they think it's a decent idea. Of course, they're not familiar with, they're not the ALR or the ALC. My question to the respondent is, I like the idea of restoring the old barn. I think that's would be very nice, but it might be quite expensive, wouldn't it? Just saying, it looks like, you know, especially love an older log building and so forth and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be more expensive than building a new residence, but and I have the money to do it. I'm not going to be held up that way, but the real reason isn't the expense. It's that the barn is beautiful and I want to see it redone. So like I could, and I want to see it saved. Basically, it's a piece of art as far as I'm concerned. It's a part of our history, and I just like that's the reason I bought the property. It wasn't the house. It was this beautiful barn and the river. So I'm willing to spend the money to bring it up to code and make it a place that that somebody can live in, because I think it'll last a lot longer that way, and it's worth the money.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and we'll make a referral motion
when we get to that point. Okay, so I have Vandenberg, Watson, and Weatherhead. Please go ahead, Director Vandenberg.
No further questions.
Okay, Chair Watson.
Yeah. So one question through to the proponent is, and staff, correct me if I'm wrong, the purpose of this, the reason why they need to apply is because the ALC regulation is 90 square meters, whereas he wants to apply for 150 square meter. Other than that, my assumption is that this would meet the criteria. First to Zach, is that correct? It's just a difference of 60 square meters in size that's requiring this application?
To Zach, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, through the chair, the application is to exceed the 90 square meter maximum gross floor area for a secondary residence. But I do want to point out that the zoning bylaw for Area G also references the ALC regs and caps it at 90 square meters. So if, you know, whether it's today or whether it's in the future, if this application were to be supported by the board, then a development variance permit to exceed the 90 square meters and also a site-specific floodplain exemption would be required. So I would just like to point out then, and to answer your question, there are other applications required in addition to this ALC referral.
Thank you. So the supplemental to that is just to the proponent, and then I have a follow-up on the floodplain exemption one, but I'll just go to the proponent for now. Is 60 square meters can be quite a size, so I don't necessarily know if that's possible, but if it is, would you be willing to reduce the size of your footprint to 90 and then you're within the regulations?
Yes. So if you look at the building and the application, it's kind of hard to see, but the breezeway in the middle brings it up by quite a bit. And that's what we as included as part of the residence. If you just look at the log portion of it, It's probably only around 100 and maybe 5 meters squared, so it's quite close to the 90 meters squared. So I could go upstairs of the log portion and cut off a chunk of it to bring it down to 90 meters squared, and then it would all work. It's just that it's gonna make the barn. It's gonna make the top part of that barn section unused. Like, it's just gonna put a big wall in the middle of the bedroom. So I could do that. But I think there's some ambiguity between like whether that breezeway is, because it's going to be an entrance for the stable portion and an entrance for the barn portion, the log portion. Is that considered a part of the residence, or is it part of the stable? So if you were to take that whole breezeway off, I'm still very close to just being that 90 meters squared. So if this doesn't follow through and it doesn't work, I would consider cutting a chunk of the second floor above the log portion completely out and just leaving it as like part of the stable. It's going to look really weird, but I would definitely be willing to do that to push this forward. If I can't do it this way, yes. I hope that answered it.
Yes, it did.
Okay, and comment you said on floodplain.
Well, I support the application from the perspective that with agricultural land, you have high archaeology indication, you have floodplain considerations, that not building on a new footprint is a huge advantage. And he's actually restoring a critical building to our heritage. And so I do support what the applicant is attempting to do. My question on the floodplain was just noting that this building already exists. Is that floodplain exemption for this breezeway? Because the building already exists, or is it because he's revamping a building where the floodplain didn't exist before that bylaw? And that's why it's being triggered.
For the portion of residential occupancy. Zach, could you confirm that? The word is flooding a residential occupancy versus a barn.
Right,
Is
gotcha.
that correct, Zach?
Yeah, through the chair, accessory buildings, storage buildings are not subject to the flood construction level in our floodplain management bylaw. But by converting an existing agricultural storage building to a dwelling unit, it does have to comply with the flood construction level, and the whole property is within the floodplain of the Salmo River.
Quick follow-up.
Yeah, so thank you. That then clarifies for me that regardless on the 90 square foot or the exemption to get 150, the floodplain construction level still applies because you're converting it to a residential use. Okay, so there's still another application regardless on size. Thank you.
The focus on breezeway is recent. I'm going to say Patrick, I won't say his last name. I designed a building that ALC approved for size and agriculture attached to a large productive farm. And later when that change came in, it would have not been approved because of the breezeway between an old and new structure. So I have some sympathy for that because there's a lot of things change continually. I'm going to continue through. We have Weatherhead and Cunningham for the second time. We don't have a recommendation. Go ahead.
Thank you through the chair. Actually, that gives me two questions to consider. My first question is around just some clarity on if I could be refreshed on the primary resident footprint. If that were smaller and then the secondary resident were a little larger, is that ever allowable through the chair to Zach?
Go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair. It doesn't necessarily matter what comes first and what comes second. Really what matters is that one is capped at 90 square meters and the other is capped at, I believe it's 500 square meters in the ALC regs.
We'll never know because it's not a chicken and egg question because it's not a poultry farm. Sorry, supplemental. Supplemental.
I like to bend things, you see. Supplemental to the chair then, on the breezeway, I think that this was really interesting to me because I always thought that a breezeway was not included in the footprint because my understanding of a footprint was on the ground. So I'm completely out to lunch on that. Is that what I'm hearing through the chair to staff, to Zach?
Do you know, Zach, is that a fire code push because fire would spread across the breezeway? Do you know, Zach?
So I guess like the one thing I just want to point out is that the breezeway wouldn't, whether it's included or not, would not change the fact that this application is required. I think when Rob and I measured the footprint not including the breezeway, and Rob, maybe you remember the specific number, it was either 120 or 130 square meters. So it wouldn't necessarily change the fact that this application is required, but it would make it less of an ask, I suppose. So it would, yeah. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, that sounds correct. That's what I remember, is about 120.
Okay, so we're turning to Director Cunningham. I don't know if you want to make a recommendation or you have further questions, because I would ask the applicant to go on mute.
No, I'll make the recommendation. I do have.
Further question first?
Yes, I'd like to speak.
Go ahead with the question.
The applicant, yes. When you revise your application to get the horses out, I think what you said about the existing footprint, okay, because it is an existing footprint that you're converting, so you're really not taking another space for housing. And you're not, I think the statement about the existing footprint, because you can't rebuild an old building on an existing footprint if you're not going to use the existing footprint. And I think that's an important consideration. I think that's something you might want to stress in your application. Personally, that's my feeling about it. Because, I think you make it a little bit more, I think that would be a little bit more important to the, with regards to whether if you're not expanding anything and you are going to meet all the other regulations and you're going to make a safer building and still retain the beauty of the original.
So more solid grounds.
Yes.
So if there are no further questions for the applicant, I don't see any, nobody in chat. So if you wouldn't mind going on mute, please, Mr. Measures, and then
Okay, thank you very much.
we will entertain our recommendations. I do have one comment that doesn't involve the applicant necessarily. My stamp's on 100 log homes, probably. If it's only 100 and whatever square feet or square meters, you can't cut 10% of a log home off without fire separation concerns, all the things you'd have to do. Log homes are boxes. What the applicant could do, and it's entirely going to be to Zach or whoever, you can reduce the occupied space upstairs because it's a barn roof. And that total square foot occupied as residential might come down to some magic number. But that's someone else's conversation. It's pretty hard to cut off 10 or 20% of a log home just because of the way they're built. Anyway, so Director Cunningham, returning to you, you have a recommendation on this?
My recommendation is to allow the applicant to revise
Update the
and
application.
update his application in conflict.
Do we have a second on referral? We have definitely seconded
Certainly.
on the propriety of referral. I think we've covered everything.
Yes.
Completely.
Till
not seeing
when?
anything.
Till
Sorry?
when? Till when?
Oh,
new
sorry,
here?
it's, yes, is 30 days, 1 month adequate? Good point, thank you, Director. Refer to June or refer to beyond for this application? How much time is needed? 1 month, 2 months?
Does that?
Is that?
Oh, sorry about that. I think this could come back to June. I mean, you could always just say, refer it to July, and then if it's ready for June, then we can proceed at that date. But it depends on how quickly the applicant can revise their ALC application.
Okay, so Director, refer to,
Yes, I changed the wording to revise to July.
refer to July, right? Okay, and not any further conversation, all in favor? Any opposed? So that will come back in July or sooner if staff wants to bump it up on the agenda. So we're 10:15. Before we move to the next one, maybe we can all get up and stretch and take a few minutes. So say, let's go 10 minutes to 10:25, if that's okay. Melville and Whitehead, this is electoral area J. Separate sort of combination of OCP and zoning bylaws for this. We do have a delegate here who could answer questions about the project or what would become of this property if these changes were approved eventually to go through. And of course, it'd be a public hearing in between. So this is this Stephanie, is this one yours? It is you, Stephanie, please, Cole's notes on 7-6.
Thank you. Through the chair, the Blueberry Community School seeks to change the official community plan land use designation from suburban residential to community services and to rezone the subject property from suburban residential 1 to institutional site specific. And that's to facilitate the purchase and development of a daycare by converting the existing building on the subject property for this use.
Okay, and so we do have Rebecca McDonald, if you wanted to join us at the table. If there were any questions about, you're representing DCCS Council, so that is the childcare
We're the not-for-profit.
not-for-profit organization. So if anybody had any questions, I will note that this is early stages for this kind of thing because it would go usually to a public hearing, but if anybody had any questions about the property, its history, or how to be used, she's here to answer any director's questions. And I better check chat as well.
Very good.
Comments or questions?
I have
Or
a comment.
go ahead.
So this particular property, it's interesting. I've driven by it hundreds of times, I'm sure, without really realizing the history of it. It was once a jam factory, and then it's been a variety of things. Apparently there was a fire at one point. It'd be interesting to know how many times it's been rezoned, but I'm really happy with the proposal that's being put forward with Blueberry Community Schools. I'm sure I got the name wrong, but anyway. 42 new childcare spaces would be the result of this if it goes through. That would be huge to our community, to the community of Robson, and it's sort of almost right across the street from the primary school. So there are no, there's only good things about this proposal, in my opinion, and I support it.
Thank you. So I have speakers list, Graham and then Newell. Please go ahead, Director Brown.
I just want to say, through the chair, I support the application wholeheartedly. We are struggling terribly in Area E with daycare. If there's anything you can do to help us, that would be my question.
So then, Director Newell, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Chair. Through the chair to the applicant, and then I'll have a supplemental to staff. Just a question I have. So how secure is this project looking?
There's a lot of moving parts. So funding is dependent on, so buying the house is subject to the funders want to see the rezoning approved. And also I would have to have the new spaces funding also approved. So that would mean that we would have to have the money to renovate the house, which is quite substantial also. Together is a lot of, there's a lot of moving parts to the process. This being one of the rate limiting, this is the, so where the first hurdle, the first significant hurdle to overcome, and then the ministry, CBT, all the other funders are aware of the project, and of course nobody can say, but everybody's interested and everybody's positive. So I think if we can pass this hurdle, that will be very positive for the rest of the project moving forward. But I can't say at all that one of those pieces wouldn't. I can't guarantee any of those pieces. Yeah, they're all unknowns, but we're hopeful.
Thank you. Further, Director Newell.
Yes, this is not to the applicant, but maybe while the applicant is there, I could ask this question of staff.
Go ahead.
So the reason I asked the question is that, and fully supportive area F, the same thing. Thank you for doing this. I was quite shocked at the numbers. I was like, wow, that's so cool. But if the project were not to go through and the rezoning had happened, like, where does that leave us? Can we do temporary rezoning conditional on everything falling into place and then we just say yes through the chair to someone, maybe Stephanie?
Go ahead.
Through the chair, should the proposal move forward to a public hearing and then the regional board consider third reading and adoption, perhaps some way throughout that process? We've received feedback from the Blueberry nonprofit about where they're at. We might have a better understanding at that time as to their funding, but should the board adopt the change in official community plan, land use designation, and zoning, then the institutional site-specific and community services OCP designation would be in place. If the applicant was looking for something temporary in nature, which they are not, there's the option of applying for a temporary use permit application. However, it's my understanding that those financial funders would be looking for permanency and assurance about the land use designation and the zoning. So in that particular instance, it might not satisfy funders' requirements.
Thank
Further,
you.
Director Newell?
No, this is awesome. Fully in support. Thank you.
Yes, I think we all want facility of this size, and yeah, it's few and far between opportunities. I was curious about the history because this is not your standard stick frame residential building. It sounds like it's a leg up on fire and all that kind of requirement. No further questions, no one else in chat. So thank you for being here and listening to our riveting conversation about all the other applications so far this morning. If you wouldn't mind, we will now look for a recommendation. Director Hanegraaff, we're in committee. In theory, I think you can make all three as a block. However, these are first two at least as a block, going ahead with OCP and zoning. We have a second discussion on the recommendations. Seeing none, all in favor?
Yeah, I'll move the third.
And Director Cunningham moving the recommendation to appoint Director Hanegraaff to chair the hearing. Second. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? So those all three will go to the board tomorrow. Thanks very much. Pretty
Chair?
straightforward. Sorry, go ahead, Director Newell. Yes.
I wonder if staff could let all of the directors know when the public hearing is finally scheduled. I'd be most curious to potentially sit in on it or listen to it or see how the community is thinking about it. It may be. Anyway, I just thought we all might want to know a bit more about that.
Stephanie made a note and she will do that. Yeah, you get unusual reactions sometimes about parking and numbers of cars and stuff like that from community. So, all right, we will then move on to 7.7. So this is Bill 44 implementation. Dana got to work through this one. Small scale multi-unit housing. Questions around this ran all the way up to 1:51 this morning. The emails I was getting on it. I see hands up. Is this on procedural or do we let Dana just kind of give us, okay, you're just getting in queue. Dana, did you want to sort of give us a pull together where we're at? We've got some community feedback, some not. You can't do this in 5 minutes, but your version of Cole's notes, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So these proposed bylaws are intended to implement the requirements of Provincial Bill 44, the small scale multi-unit housing, now commonly referred to as SMA, which requires the RDCK to allow for a minimum of one secondary suite and or one detached accessory dwelling unit in all restricted zones. And so what staff has put forward is a recommendation to allow for 2 dwelling units across our single family residential zones. If a property is under 1 hectare, that could be the choice of a single family home with a suite or a duplex. And if a property is over 1 hectare, that could be the choice of a duplex, a single family home with a suite, or a single family home with an attached dwelling unit. And when I say detached dwelling unit, those are commonly referred to as laneway houses, cottages, carriage suites, but basically a smaller dwelling to the principal dwelling that's its own building. There's also a number of amendments required to implement this and to just kind of clarify and clean things up in our bylaws as part of this implementation. Those are the best way to refer to those is to check Appendix B. There's a table of concurrence. And the way I would recommend reading that is the first column has the bylaw and the section number that we're referring to. The next column has the existing wording. The next column has the proposed wording, and the final column will have a little note about the rationale for the change, which is fleshed out further in the staff report. If a lot of them are just little changes, like a term might be switched, in that case, for your ease, I've tried to highlight that in red so you can see that it's maybe just a wording change instead of a big change to that to hopefully lessen your reading, because I recognize this is a couple hundred pages that I've provided to you. So I'm available to answer questions, and I'll leave it at there. Hopefully that's a good introduction.
No, that's good. Good coverage for 200 pages. So I have quite a few speakers. I have Watson, Newell, Weatherhead, and Vandenberg. So go ahead, please, Chair Watson.
Thank you. So Dana, yes, that was a lot of work on your part. I'm trying to go back to Sam here so I can see you. First, thanks to Christine. She last minutes took all of the documents and separated them out on eScribe. So thank you for doing that. It was much easier to circle back and forth. So I'll likely be looking for us to do that moving forward. Thank you, Christine. And in terms of the report itself, I had 2 questions. One is in general, so I'll ask that one first. There was a note in one of the APHC, or it was the public comment, regarding the removal of horticulture being an acceptable use. And I didn't actually see that anywhere. So is that in a specific bylaw somewhere? And if it is, I just want to elaborate a little bit on why we would remove horticulture.
Yes, I will try to not make this too of a long-winded story, but in the R2 zone, generally horticulture in the I'll back up. Generally, horticulture in the smaller residential zones is an accessory use, meaning that if you have an established principal use, you can have that as an accessory use. So usually generally R1, R2, it depends on where we are. And then in the larger zones, R3, R4, it's generally a principal use. So it can happen on its own. You don't need a residence there. In electoral areas A, B, and C, when the uses were listed, horticulture was duplicated. So horticulture was listed once as a principal use and once as an accessory use, which it shouldn't be like that. It should be one or the other. And so looking back at, because I was fixing that whole section anyways, it was just something I thought to correct. And so for areas A, B, and C, where it was duplicated as a principal use and an accessory use, I moved it to just an accessory use. So it's just listed once. And then in the other zones, in bylaw F, I, J, and K, that's where the public letter came from. They were in short acres, so they're running about the R2I zone. I also made that change, but going back through my notes, that was more of a copy and paste error in my work. The R2I zone didn't have that duplication. It clearly stated it was a principal use, so I didn't make that change. And so that's why you're not seeing it, is that was updated from the referral stage to the staff report stage. That fix was made.
Okay.
So yeah, sorry. Like I said, that was going to be a long answer, but I tried to make it simple.
It's okay. This is not a simple conversation.
What she's saying is A, B, and C, we made a mistake 10 years ago.
And she fixed
And I can't blame my colleagues because they're all changed. Go ahead.
Well, as long as horticulture doesn't require principal dwelling to begin with, because I do know a lot of folks that do rent out lots, and when we're producing agriculture, that's a positive thing. So regardless, I'll leave it to those areas. Specifically to the Area D Club, of course, Ainsworth is the only community affected. Densification in Ainsworth is a really tricky question. And so while I believe the way it would work is that similar to any building application, even with these changes, if septic will not fit within the lot, it just wouldn't be approved. So you can still have the zoning for it, but the lot constraints will still apply as they do now. So that's a question to ensure I've got that correct. And the follow-up to that is that it does note if there is a community sewer or water system that they would have to connect to those. And I'll just note that while Ainsworth has a community sewer system, it does not have any space. There's no more hookups available. So is that something that we need to ensure is captured in the language that yes, the system is there. We cannot implore them to take a new connection. I don't think we can do that, nor should we do that. So just checking on the language around ensuring that that sewer system is not now going to be obligated to take new connections, and that the service constraints of that geography would still be captured through septic applications and other aspects of water and things like that. So the densification is still going to capture that some places just can't densify. That was me not being super clear. Hopefully you got that.
No, thank you, Director Watson. I think you're expressing what probably my biggest concern or area of concern for these small recommendations is just making sure we can safely and adequately service them. And you're correct. In the past, our zoning has tried to match the capacity of improvement districts or other service providers. And now what we've been required is to kind of blanket allow that zoning, but we still have the stop of the building permit stage. So I've been working with the building department to make sure that's really fleshed out. And so at the building permit stage, if there's not room for a septic system to accommodate the extra fixtures of a unit, or there isn't a connection to potable water through a service provider, then that wouldn't be reason enough to hold back a building permit, even if the zoning permits it. And so that's really relevant to one of the letters you'll find in the referral comments from the Tagum Improvement District. They also asked that question. They don't have any connections, and the connections they do, they're saving for vacant lots. And so although I have to change the zoning to allow for a minimum of 2 dwelling units, they can still in their bylaws prioritize who gets the connections and not offer a connection for an accessory dwelling unit on a property. And what we've done on our end is just really make sure we've cleaned it up between planning and bylaw, that we would require a letter or something to that effect if it wasn't an improvement district to say, yes, they have a connection or no, they don't. And that would hinge on whether a building permit was approved or not. So we do still have that discretion. It's just no longer reflected in the zoning. It's more a check at the building permit stage.
Thank you.
Further?
Well, I think the further is just that to the province, letting them know, like, great idea, you should check out our land base first and see if it's actually functional. Because I think we're going to make all these changes and see, specifically, Ainsworth is a great example where that densification is actually very limited by the geography. So I guess I have further. David also on the list too.
Thank you.
Oh, and may I add one more thing?
Yes.
And just in light of maybe that discrepancy, we've also worked with the building department on some materials that we can put out to the public for if building permit applications or if someone's interested in a building application. So we have an information circular we've started, and also a checklist for accessory dwelling units and secondary suites, hoping to kind of nip that in the bud and help people out when they come to the front counter with these inquiries. They don't get too far down the line before finding surprises like that.
Thanks. So I have Newell, Weatherhead, Vandenberg, Davidoff, and maybe not. And Cunningham, yes. Director Newell first.
Thank you. Thanks. So on the other side of the coin that was tossed in the air by Director Watson, Chair Watson, earlier today, we had a conversation around septic systems and capacity and lot size. And so my comment at this point in time, and the first thing that struck me reading much of the information is, we could actually put triplexes quite easily on an acre of land. So I'm also maybe not arguing for, but highlighting that the potential to densify, I think we took kind of the minimum path, which is probably right, and we see the complications. But I think there's an avenue open to densify even more in some areas, either by reducing the required lot size from a hectare to an acre, or increasing the number of units allowed from 2 to 3, for example. So I don't know if there's a comment, Dana, or simply that's me making a statement. Thanks, Chair.
No, thank you, Director Newell. I do have a response if that's okay with the chair.
Go ahead. Yes, please.
You're correct. You'll find that I went a more conservative route. I didn't tinker with our minimum lot sizes. I just upped them to all to the two dwelling unit, and same with accessory dwellings. We may in the future want to see if they're feasible on smaller lots, but however, in the timeline the province has given us, I don't feel like I can do a fulsome investigation into that. And so we can look at it into the future with the assistance of qualified professionals. But as I don't have that expertise, you'll find that I have gone the more precautionary route. And so we have the time to look in the future if we want to, but for now, I do think that's the best recommendation until we have more data.
Okay, I see a thumbs up, Director Newell, and you're good. Director Weatherhead.
Thank you, through the chair. This is a great report, Dana. All this work, I was really blown away at the amount that this requires. So I just noticed that Area K didn't have any amendments, and is that just telling me that an Area E too, I believe?
And J.
And J, yeah. Is that just because we already aligned with this, that our OCPs were already, our bylaws, not our OCP? So.
Through the chair to Director Weatherhead, you do have changes. You're just captured under you share a zoning bylaw with areas F, I, J, and K. So all the amendments to bylaw number 1675 would pertain to area K.
Okay, that's what, thank you.
And there are, and you've also brought up another good question. There are no changes to any of the OCPs at this time. That's a little strange. Typically, you would see an amendment to an official community plan come first, and then the zoning bylaw comes second, because all bylaws enacted after an OCP is passed have to be aligned. But the way the province has structured this bill is there's a 1-year flexibility. So there will be changes coming to the OCP, but they're not due until end of December 2025. And so we've tackled this more immediate deadline first, and then you will see changes to the official community plans in the future, but we have more leeway. So for this one time only, zoning bylaws can come first and official community plans can come second.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Director Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you, Dana, and through the chair. Just a couple of questions for clarification. Generally speaking, the setbacks for the additional structures on the property, have they changed, or they still essentially remain the same?
No, I haven't changed the setbacks at all. What's in your bylaw will stay.
Thank you. My second question, if I may, and I have a third. The gross floor area referred to is 90 square feet. Is that the gross, then, to understand that's the footprint, regardless of whether it's 1 floor or 2 floor? 2 floor being, so 45 in the lower, 45 in the top? Do I understand that correctly?
That's correct. 90 square meters is the gross floor area. And so that if it was 1 floor, that would be the whole floor. If it was 2 floors, that would be the area of both floors combined. It's not the footprint, it's the gross floor area.
Thank you. And my third and final question.
3 questions. I didn't know. No, please go ahead.
Regarding on the private sewage, attacking on to Director Newell's question, it's not clear. Are these individuals' private sewage systems, one for the house and one completely separate for the accessory? Or is there a way to combine them into one on-site private sewage?
Oh, I wish the building department was here. That might be a better question of what they typically see.
And I
I think
understand
generally
that's
we see a separate field for the detached dwelling unit, but I'm not, it would be the ropes recommendation, and so I'm not sure what the building department typically sees.
So there were many community systems. The ones that come to mind are on strata. So there's a legal framework. Go ahead.
I'm talking community, I'm talking separate, the community has its own.
Yes. Okay, go ahead.
So my comment would be is that they ought to be separate, they cannot support being separate. They shouldn't be allowed is my knee jerk, I could be proven wrong or convinced wrong. And that's an interior health. Interior health needs to provide some supplemental information. If we're going to pass this through, we need to understand the bigger picture here and how that's really going to work. And so that's my final comment on that, because we could have this repeat again in the future, intending to do the right things, but we didn't step back far enough to see what influences will stop this, like septic systems. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go to Davidoff, Cunningham, perhaps myself still, and then Watson for the second time, unless anyone else. Director Davidoff, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Wow. And thanks for all the hard work. We had some discussion about this at our APHC, and it kind of, I guess my comments and questions are going to flow from our conversation that we had on an earlier matter or item this morning. And it has to do with who's responsible for what. We have some huge issues with respect to vulnerable aquifers. In particular, one in Area I that we've identified, and we spent substantial funds in studying that aquifer and assessing it, and that held up our OCP for a couple of years. And now we have a situation, for example, where we have an improvement district, and I'll mention it specifically, Boykin Improvement District, that has a septic system on every property, and these are quarter-acre lots. And then what's happened is that Teck sold the right-of-way in the middle of the subdivision, and we have approved additional wells and septic systems and provided building permits for properties on the Teck right-of-way in the middle of the Boykin Improvement District subdivision. And the owners there were allowed to dig wells because they're not constrained from doing so, because they're not part of the Boykin Improvement District, because the Teck right-of-way wasn't included as part of the Boykin Improvement District. And so now, technically, under these rules, those properties could densify. Properties in the Boykin Improvement District could densify. We're going to be facing huge pressure. And then who is the gatekeeper? Is it health? We learned this morning that all of a sudden, we can provide variances for different types of septic systems. But I'm just thinking about this whole understand, like I guess the maxim of no good deed goes unpunished. Someone's going to be punished here. And I'm thinking it's going to be local government. It's going to be us and our staff that are going to be dealing with huge pressures to densify. And then how are we going to deal with this? And in particularly the septage issue. It's easier, of course, where you have community water, community septage, but even then, even if you have community water, in Otishenya right now, Otishenya Improvement District, my understanding is that they're not allowing any more access to their water system because they are totally subscribed and maxed out their existing with their existing connections. So if you have a vacant lot there and you don't have a water, you can't connect to the Otishania Improvement District. So just on and on and on, like the number of scenarios for in rural areas is so potentially huge. And I guess my questions to the CAO is that, is the ministry, is the provincial government providing us with any funding to address these huge pressures? They passed the legislation, but what kind of money flows with that to help us address all these different pressures that are coming? So that's my question, I guess.
Through the chair, $280,000 was provided to us.
Is that one time supplemental, Chair?
Yes, and that's over 3 years, or?
Through the chair, that was the LG cap change.
Or just the LG cap.
This is just a one-time payment for $280,000, and then we did get the other $250,000 to explore regional growth processes as well.
Which may overlap,
Yeah.
depending how we interpret it, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's
Yes. Okay,
supplemental,
thanks, Trent. Well, yeah, briefly, we're going, it is relevant, go ahead, but we're going into the fast unknown here.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna ask is that I'm sure this is not something that we're wrestling with, but the key thing is that the real pressure is going to come when people start figuring out what they could potentially do, and it's I think we need to start working like ASAP on pressuring the provincial government during this election cycle to make commitments that they will fund us with provide additional funds to address the pressures, because this could be a nightmare for us. So I'll stop there.
Through the chair, if I could, I don't think the committee or the board needs to be overly concerned at this moment with getting ahead of things. The rural landscape that we have, the availability of services, transit, infrastructure, if densification was something that was an opportunity for either developers, property owners, however you want to do it, a $400 application to rezone is not going to deter them. There would have been a lot of applications coming forward, and we would have seen a trend of this developing. This move with these rezoning or the changes to these bylaws, it just takes a step out of the process. And I think that that step is not overly complicated or prohibitive for people. So I think that if we were seeing that kind of push in terms of development, we would have seen it already.
Okay,
I'm cautiously optimistic is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Through the chair.
My term has always been foolishly optimistic, knowing I'm going to be on YouTube a little later. I don't mind what language they quote for me. I had actually my name next there, and so I'm going to go before the rest of the first-time speakers, because I share some of Director Davidoff's concerns very generally that we may get back into a corner, sort of an untenable situation where we're trying to make judgment calls where we don't have the final authority. We don't have any follow-up authority or mechanism. We can't go into a bylaw and say this works, that doesn't work. We're gonna make you do something different. We're in the game with a toe in the water that it could pull us in much deeper. And I've said many times before, in some ways, I'd rather we just define rural and let the land support, and the authorities who decide what the land can support are not us in terms of servicing. We will have, in my mind, 10 years from now, while I'm retired, minimal guidelines that we say if it's zoned and we have community plans and structure, we have that. When it comes to servicing the site, someone else has got to step up and take full responsibility. Today, to me, it's Ministry of Health, and they have downloaded that responsibility to Professional Alliance in a structure that does not have the same professional oversight as almost every other statutory profession. We as well, CEO, you have a statutory obligation with your professional designations. There's a way to check on your work, whether or not you're adhering to good standards and there's a way to punish somebody for misbehaving. That shouldn't be our worry, keeps coming up. So to me, there's another whole level of simplification down the road that I would love to see. And we would have some wrinkles. We already have in areas A and K where we have such skinny lots along the lake, thanks to Ministry of Transportation, historical subdivision practices, that we have blanket reduced the front setback requirement subject to MOTI approval of safety, just because we exist in a situation that we didn't create. So our rural R1, R2, R3, R4 could look very different. It's very streamlined, rely more on servicing and the sensible development potential as CEO referred to. Is there transit? Is there shopping? Is there health? And step back from the rest of it. And our staff might really enjoy living in that world where they're not trying to second guess some other authority. So that was my whole comment on these 200 and whatever changes. I will go back to the rest of the speaker list. We have Cunningham and for the second time Watson and nobody else for the first time. Please, Director Cunningham.
Thank you. First, I'll start with a comment and then get to the question. We have had in our zoning bylaw in Area G for Weimar, the provision for two houses on one lot for many years, well, since for at least 6 or 8 years. And with regards to septic, what it was as you remember, in the old days, we used to have an inspector who did all the septic tanks, and then they sent it private to what we are now. But in any case, what they used for working out septic was the Agape area and the number of occupants for both houses, and pretended they were one, and if, for quite purposes of the amount of septic and the size of the field for that amount. And if you couldn't size the field and get it in your property, then you couldn't build. It's as simple as that. And some of the properties in Weimar have excellent septic, and others have marginal septic, and we have things like the community hall that's pumped up into the ball grounds, all sorts of things. But in any case, that's the way they took care of the septic system. But my question to staff is, I looked over the bylaw changes with regards to the Weimar situation. And what already exists with regards to, I think there's probably about a half a dozen properties where there are two houses or a house and a cabin on each lot, that kind of thing. And they're all used for full, maybe it might be nice to get Airbnb, but in fact, they're all used for full-time houses. And we can use a ton more. So, but my comment is, I had trouble looking at the new bylaw and seeing what happens to what we already have existing in Weimar. And I looked at all the numbers, and I'm sorry, it took me half an hour to find the bylaw in the midst of all the bylaws, because there's 60 or 80 pages. But however, the point being, yeah, can you explain or tell me some information with regard to what happened there?
Yes. Through the chair to Director Cunningham, I believe Weimar is zoned in the Area G Club is zoned R1 town site residential. And so not much had to be changed in that zone because that zone already allows for single detached housing, duplex housing, multi-unit housing, and accessory dwelling units. And so all that changed was updating the terms because you had the older language of 1 family, 2 family, or multi-family dwellings. So the change to your permitted uses is really more just updating and using consistent terms to the other bylaws. And then the other change would be just your accessory dwelling unit regulations. They used to be, because only some zones allowed accessory dwelling units in G, so there used to be specific regs in each zone about them. Now, because most of the zones allow them, they were moved into the general use section of your bylaw. So not as many changes to G as other areas.
Yeah, okay, no, well, thank you, because I think, quite frankly, I agree with the chair that we will have minimal disruption because we've already gone halfway down that road and had no problems at all. I mean, and the big thing with the septic regulations, and perhaps if with some of the we don't have any properties in Weimar that are not on city water, and areas where you do have wells, again, you've got to be able to meet both regulations in order to be able to do it. If you can't, you can't.
Okay, thank you. So I don't see any other first-time speakers, nobody new in the chat. We have 6 recommendations that could absolutely be a block. We're ready to put them to board tomorrow. However, for the second time, Chair Watson.
Yes,
Floor
and
is
then
yours.
I'll make a motion. So I apologize, Dan, I did have one follow-up question I forgot to ask. And I'm not sure if you'll have this one or not, but Ainsworth specifically, when we did the rezoning in 2016, which was only the community of Ainsworth, not the other 23 communities in Area D that don't have any zoning. We had made provisions based on community feedback for short-term rentals to only be an accessory use. And the language in the bylaw was unclear to the bylaw enforcement, and we ran into some issues last year. I believe we were able to confirm that that language does stand to ensure short-term rentals are only an accessory use. But I wanted to clarify that because if we don't have the correct language, I'm curious if we can make sure we get that language in now. What we have now is several short-term rentals that have expanded in Ainsworth, and with so little residential, it was a clear indication from the public that they really wanted controls on that measure. So I want to make sure we're doing that. So that's my clarifying note, and then I'll have a final comment and a motion if you would like it, Chair.
Well, eventually it would be nice to have a recommendation. Dan, go ahead, please.
Yes, and Chair Watson, I apologize because there is so many bylaws and they are so close but a little different. I'm just checking D because I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I think it looks to me like you are similar to bed and breakfast accommodation is definitely within the principal building. Vacation rentals, I'll just have to look at the bylaw section 20.
I do see Nelson on. Is it something we can, because I know Nelson was following that file.
Would you know offhand, Nelson?
Well, we haven't made any changes, so that provision requiring the owner live in the house stands where there was previous confusion.
Yes, so I just found this section. Vacation rentals are also confined to the principal dwelling. And then there's an additional new wording for the accessory dwelling units in every zone says that they aren't allowed to be short-term rentals.
Okay, great. That's what I had assumed, but I wanted to verify because we were amending the OCP through this process, or the
The zoning portion. So I do have Director Vandenberg on for the second time, or did you want to make a recommendation anyway? It's your choice.
Well, I want to make a comment just on the note that we did receive funding to address the pressure that this puts on our planning department, and I'm grateful the province recognizes we can't just, do a ton of things without the capacity to do so. But within that, we do, of course, have the overall planning discussion and OCPs that desperately need updating to capture all of the changes that's happening in our rural areas. So I just wanted to repeat what I say every time, which is I'm really looking forward to being able to review and assess zoning for all of the communities that indicated they wanted it in Area D, so that we can at least have the foundations in place for good development, which I know this is where the province is going. We're behind and we also have constraining geography. So I can make a motion to move them as a block, and if it's only third reading, you can still go to questions.
Yeah.
Would you like me to do that?
Go ahead if you wish. So,
All three
so
are
we
all
have all six
as a block.
recommendations as a block, all to go to third reading. Do we have a second for that? Okay, so we'll go to discussion, but we have Director Vandenberg top of the list.
Great, thank you through the chair to Dana. The 90 square meters, where does that number come from? Because when I look at it objectively and practically, it's a constraint. 968 square feet for an accessory, single floor, multiple floors, is barely a 2-bedroom functional home. So where does the 90 square feet or square meters come from, please?
Yeah, through the chair to Director Vandenberg. Historically, the 90 square meters comes from the BC Building Code. It used to be secondary suites were restricted to 40% of the principal dwelling that they were within, or 90 square meters, whatever was the lesser number. The BC Building Code has been amended, so that's not a requirement anymore. But that's where the baseline of 90 square meters comes from. It's also a requirement of the Agricultural Land Commission's regulations. So ADUs, accessory dwelling units, I should say, that are in the AL ALC or ALR lands are restricted to that footprint of 90 square meters. So we've kept our, just to make it consistent, instead of having 90 square meters in some zones and a different footprint in other zones, or gross floor area, I should say, we've kept 90 throughout. And the reason why, the rationale that I have for having a maximum gross floor area is it's a way to make sure that that accessory dwelling unit is secondary to the principal dwelling. If you were in a municipality, you could use things like site coverage, which is what the province is recommending. But because we have such large lot sizes, even a 25% lot site coverage isn't going to really restrict the building size. And so instead of going that route, I recommended a maximum footprint for an accessory dwelling unit to make sure that that building is smaller and incidental to the principal dwelling. And the 90 square meters was chosen to align with the ALC's rules, so we'd have a consistent number across our zones.
Further, Director?
I understand the rationale, but I'm concerned that it's going to be a constraint. 90 square meters, less than 100,000 square feet, is not functional for the intent of what we're trying to do, I guess, is my knee jerk to this. I would really like to talk to a building professional and talk about the logic around that. Bumping it up to 100 square meters, just over 1,000 square feet, is a lot more practical and doable. If somebody's going to invest in building, they probably want to build something that's functional. And I don't know that 90 square meters does that. That's it.
So that's an item to flag for the future. Numerous changes we're going to have to go through for land use. So we do have the 6 recommendations. They are all moved for the 3 readings. I'm going to welcome Director Page. We're nearing the end of our discussions. I don't know if you would desire freedom of the floor, if I would be fair enough. Okay, so further discussion on the recommendations. Not seeing nothing in chat, seeing none, all in favor. Any opposed? And we're in committee, we won't record opposed. So those 6 will go to board tomorrow, and we'll see if they go as a block tomorrow. Oh, no, they can't.
Yeah.
Well, who's gonna get to read all of those tomorrow?
You are.
Okay. We are at 8. There were no environmental services specific items. Oh, thanks very much, Steph. And thank you, Dana, unless she's gone already. However, Uli has faithfully sat here because he may be up, depending on the questions, at 9. We have under rural admin, we have 2 items for community works funding applications. 9.1 Kitchener Valley Rec and Fire Protection Society Community Hall electrical upgrade. Area B, staff report pretty well sets it out. $12,000 within the $1 million odd that the director has to allocate. Any questions for staff, or do we want to have move the recommendation, Director Tierney?
I'd like to make the recommendation.
Okay, as presented, do you have a second? Seconded. So discussion on the recommendation or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That goes to tomorrow as well. 9.2, another community works, Robson Raspberry Improvement District. This one's a little different in my mind, but maybe we'll have some questions. So, Lisa, I don't know if she's online or not, but I think Uli has background on these as well. So this is Area J, Community Works application, $51,000 for the asset management study. Review Director Hanegraaff.
Yeah, so this is, am I allowed to speak?
Yeah, floor's yours.
So this is, the water system for Robson Raspberry, and they've actually put an expression of interest in, either late last year or early this year to, move over to the RDCK water system. So I think part of the reason for doing the study is that this is information that will be needed, I would say, regardless. If we accept them or not, they need to know where they're at moving forward with their system. And as such, I do support the request.
Okay, you want to move the
Yeah,
recommendation
I
or
move the recommendation.
do we have a second? Seconded. Discussion, I see Director Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you to the chair. This one's pretty interesting to me because it's an asset management study. And it's an improvement district, which improvement districts have a hard challenge to creatively manage their systems, and an asset management study is one of those exciting tools for the toolbox. I guess my question would be around, does it then suggest that in the future that this improvement district would in fact then approach RDCK for absorption? Is that a prerequisite to this in any way, and not from what this application is, but generally speaking, when you look at this from a whole? Because as you know, Wendell Irrigation System also is in this situation and they could use this help. So I'm contemplating what doors this is opening up for me.
Yeah, so we will go to Uli. Previous suggestion by a previous director, my predecessor, that Wendell become regional district, started a small riot.
Yep,
So
I
they
understand.
never asked. However, yeah, there are requirements, and Uli, the floor is yours.
Yes, so one of the requirements, okay, let's first start about what the director already pointed out. One way or another, that is an important activity to understand the future cost and the condition of the assets for the water system. Even if it's just a loan to structure your rates, and there is significant discussion within the water system right now about raising rates. It is one of the systems that very likely will as well have significant challenges in regards to asbestos pipe replacement, which is a cost driver. So for them, it is essential to understand what their future obligations are and their challenges, and this will help them with it. In regards to an application to a regional district to become a regional district water system, yes, it is a prerequisite that they have a solid understanding of their assets, so have some form of asset management plan. And it is one of the elements of assessment for a system that needs to be, or ideally is in place when they do an application. It significantly increases the chance for success in the evaluation process.
Supplemental.
Yes, thank you for that. And that's what I would have expected to hear. Thank you for that. Now, so what I'm hearing though then is that utilizing the Community Works Fund is a tool for, like Wendell Irrigation System, to utilize to develop their asset management plan, regardless of whether or not there's an intention to go to do anything further with RDCK. Am I correct?
I think it's now eligible. Before they'd have to evolve to build something. Now they can just plan.
Correct. Asset management plan is a specifically identified eligible element in Community Works funds.
Thank you. So we do need to discuss that. So I see Newell and Davidoff. Director Newell, please go ahead.
That was my question. Thanks, Director Vandenberg and Uli.
Hey, Director Davidoff.
Yeah, mine's really easy. In the recommendation in eScribe, raspberry is misspelled.
Oh, yeah. It's raspberry.
So how does it look here? Are we good? Oh, raps, okay. Thank you.
That's the gangster spelling.
Gangster spelling. Okay, thank you, Director Davidoff.
Yeah, I thought we should change that, so.
Yeah, I think Christina's taken note of that. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Any opposed? So that is carried. We'll go to tomorrow. So we are at 11:20, and I will go to public time, item 10. I see we have one, maybe two members of the public. There's nobody in the gallery remaining here. Well, we actually do have, I guess, Director Page is public. Do we have any questions for this committee from the public? If you want to unmute yourself and go ahead with your question. Not hearing anything, I don't see anybody unmuting, so I take that as a no. So we will move to item 11. Looking for a recommendation to adjourn. I see broad support. Without objection, we are adjourned at 11:21. Thanks very much, everybody. Another, I thought, really good discussion session in the middle of that hopefully will move us forward. See you all this afternoon.